a replacement for Gordon, who recently left, and we're really close on that. We hope to announce that here pretty soon, but we're really close to finalizing that process. So we're looking forward to being back up to full staff. Sorry I had to miss the morning session, but hopefully you all were able to meet Anthony, who is, for right now, our newest staff, but fairly soon will no longer be our newest staff person. But we're very, very happy to have Anthony with us. He's got great experience, and he probably mentioned this, but he's a two-time AmeriCorps alumni. So we're just really happy to have Anthony with us. Hopefully you all will get a chance to get to know him better as he reaches out to you for various things. But he's going to be involved in pretty much everything that we do as our systems and process manager. So the other big thing is about appropriations for the federal fiscal year 2025. And I'm going to quickly, if I can get it sized right, I'm going to quickly share my screen for what is a somewhat terrifying chart that unfortunately, even though it's terrifying, is not unusual for the AmeriCorps funding process. And this chart, I should say, comes from America's Service Commissions, and specifically, they have a States for Service arm that does kind of this this kind of intense looking at federal legislation and including federal appropriations. So I can't really make it a whole lot bigger without losing detail, but I am going to make it a little bit bigger and scroll down. So the key thing is that right now the House version, which is in the second to the last column on the right, essentially proposes to completely eliminate AmeriCorps State National, AmeriCorps NCCC, and also state service commissions. So the only, and it also proposes a pretty big cut, scroll down a little bit more, a pretty big cut to the AmeriCorps salaries and expenses line. So pretty significant cut. You can see the bottom line would be that it would end up being, sorry, let me scroll back up at the top. Okay, so compared to what was approved for the fiscal year that we're currently being funded under, it would be almost $1 billion reduction. So pretty significant. Again, this is just the House version. The Senate hasn't released its version. So I wouldn't say panic just yet, but it is serious, and these kinds of things where one body of Congress or the other proposes significant cuts to AmeriCorps, they're always concerning. So that's kind of the big thing. Essentially, all this would leave in place would be VISTA and the Senior Corps programs, AmeriCorps Seniors programs. Okay. So what I would recommend for this is, one, first of all, just remember that all of the restrictions on lobbying apply to any of your staff that are supported by AmeriCorps funds and your AmeriCorps members while you or they are on AmeriCorps time. When you're on your own time, you can do whatever you want. So I am not encouraging anybody to lobby, but what I am encouraging all of you to do is to go out and just talk to your congressional delegation, so your representative and the two two Tennessee senators, and just tell them about what your program does and the impact that you have on the community. I would also encourage you to get your partners to do the same thing. Again, you're not asking for anything. You're just saying, here's what AmeriCorps does for us in our community and the impact it makes and why it is important to us. Because it's really important that Congress know that when they're making these kinds of decisions. Now, what I've heard from kind of the folks at the national level that are tracking this very closely is that the Senate is not going to look anything like this, that the Senate version of the appropriations for FY25 will be probably closer to what was enacted for fiscal year 2024. But until that happens, it's kind of anybody's guess is what's going to end up in the final version. So those are kind of the big things that I had for you all today. So we can spend the rest of the time kind of engaging in dialogue, questions.
Jim, so besides the doom and gloom existential threat scenario, which always seems to rear its head in one way, shape, or form, there's also the kind of the expiration of the ARP funds. And I feel like that kind of hit nationally funded programs and like direct AmeriCorps programs a bit this year. I get the sense that Volunteer Tennessee had some funding because it was already allocated, but maybe that won't be as available in the coming program year. The percentages I'm consistently seeing, even in like best case scenarios, because AmeriCorps is continuing to move forward with increasing the minimum living allowance without the presence of ARP funds, which is fundamentally going to reduce the number of AmeriCorps positions that can be funded nationally. And I feel like that's like a, like a 70, 80,000 down to like 40, 50,000 member kind of cut. And that's not this scenario. That's just based on that. So is our program is strategically positioning itself to try to be able to absorb up to a 30% cut. Is that a thing people should be thinking about?
Yeah. So there's a couple things in there. So let's look at the kind of the individual components. One is that the money for the upcoming program year is in hand. Well, it's not completely in hand because we have to get the federal award letter still for the formula. We have the competitive award letters already in hand. We still are waiting on the formula award letters for the 2024-2025 program year, which is the year that most of you are getting ready to start at the beginning of August. But that money is available. That award just needs to be processed. And that's just a technical behind the scenes thing that happens every single year. That federal award letter has to be processed to get the money to Volunteer Tennessee so that we can then get it to you all. But the money is there. So there's no problem with availability of funds going into 24-25. So the contracts that Latifah just sent out to you all, don't worry about those. The money's there. Barring any kind of really unforeseen problem with the federal award letters, which we don't expect, all of that money should be in hand and ready to go August 1. Now, the award letters are supposed to be finalized on July 25th. If for some reason we don't have those two formula award letters by then, we will immediately let you all know. But for right now, our person in the regional office of AmeriCorps is telling us that she expects that the awards are going to be in hand by that date. So that's the upcoming year. Now, looking beyond the upcoming year, we will not have American Rescue Plan funds available anymore. And that was a significant amount of funding that was available to us and to other states across the country. Roughly, depending on what programs requested, we were using between about $800,000 to about $1.2 or $3 million over the last couple of years to supplement the normal AmeriCorps money with that American Rescue Plan money. So it is it is absolutely going away. We will unfortunately have some unspent funds, American Rescue Fund Plan funds, but there's just no way we can use them beyond this upcoming program year. So, and it's not a whole lot of money. It's well, in the grand scheme of things, in terms of the total amount, for me, it's a lot of money because it's like $150,000 or $250,000, something like that. So it's a lot of money for an individual, but in terms of the grand scheme of the total funding that was available and what we do annually, it's not a whole lot of money that's going to be turned back. So setting aside the dire stuff related to the chart that's on the screen, there are a couple things. One, as Jason mentioned, AmeriCorps has already committed to increasing the living allowance for the 25-26 program year. They're going to increase it by, I think, $1,700 over the current amount, which will take the total, I think, to $20,400, I think, is the total for, again, this is not for the upcoming year that's about to start in August. This is for a year from now. So August of 2025. The minimum living allowance for a full-time member would be $20,400. I think that's the right number. However, the cost per MSY is not going up. So this year it was $25,000 per MSY. Next year it's going to be $25,000 per MSY. So there's a $1,700 increase in the living allowance, but there's not a corresponding increase in the cost per MSY that programs have available to spend on their entire program, not just the member support cost, but everything. So that is going to be a significant impact at the program level, regardless of what the funding looks like. Now, the other thing that could impact is if the amount of total funding is less than what we currently have, just in terms of the normal AmeriCorps funding. And again, this chart that I have up, what we're about to start operating under is this FY24 enacted column. And you can see for AmeriCorps State National, it was level funding from the previous year or the year that we're wrapping up. So 557 million. Even if it's funded at that level, there will still be that issue of the increased living allowance and the cost per MSY. Now, if your program does not use any full-time members, it is probably going to be less of a challenge for you. Or if you don't use a whole lot of full-time members, it's probably not going to have as much impact. But if you use any full-time members at all, and for some of you, you only use full-time members, it is going to have a significant impact to not have that additional $1,700 per member in the cost per MSY available to you to make up that increase in the living allowance. So I think I hit all the things you asked about, Jason. So if I missed anything, let me know.
Yeah, I was just trying to create some dialogue so that people on this call that aren't on past calls and things are broadly aware that as you write your recompetes in the fall or your continuations, that the pool of money could very well be smaller, even if it's flat funding doesn't play out.
Yes.
I mean, even in like a flat funding scenario, there's going to be likely some kind of reduction.
Yeah. Well, in a flat funding scenario, that issue of the cost per MSY comes into play, where we might have the same amount of money available, but the members are getting more. Which, let me just state for the record, I'm all for the members getting more living allowance. That I think is fair, but it is going to directly impact programs in their ability to spread those federal funds to other parts of their budget. Because the way that's going to work out, and again, we're talking kind of specifically about full-time members, is essentially that entire $25,000 MSY, cost per MSY, is going to go almost entirely to the member support costs. So the living allowance, FICA, the healthcare costs that you have to provide if they want it, the accidental death and dismemberment that you have to provide. So there's not going to be a whole lot left over for you to put in other parts of the budget. Let's see. It looks like maybe. Oh, yeah. So Angie asked for a link about the information. Angie, let me see if I can find that really quickly. It's going to be on. Well, let me look for that really quickly, and then I'll put it in the chat.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, sure. I don't know if all of you are subscribed to AmeriCorps has several email groups that they have. One of them is the AmeriCorps State National email group, and to be honest, I'm not sure where that is on their website. I think it's on there somewhere where you can go and subscribe to that email. And that announcement just came out a couple days ago on that AmeriCorps State National email group, and I think it's posted on their website. But I'm gonna have to look for that.
I don't think I'm subscribed to that email, but I'd love to be a little bit more conversant about this before I share it with David Montague.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm looking to pull that up right now. I should be able to. I should be able to have that for you before we're done with this session.
Okay, and if I'm the only one who needs it, I could shoot you an email and you could just forward me something, or maybe others would like it as well.
Yeah, I'm sure others would like to see it.
Okay.
Oh, I think so. I think Anthony posted it in the chat box.
Oh, thank you.
Oh yeah, he posted the link to sign up for that newsletter. So that's the sign up. Let me see though. I'll continue to look for the link on their website. But other questions or discussion points about not only just the funding stuff, but anything else?
Yeah. Jason brought this up before we left for lunch earlier, but it was the main question that I wanted to ask today, which is regarding the changes in terms of term limits and service term limits. I just know that on my end, and I think and maybe Jason saw this as well. It's a little confused because if you go on the ASC base camp, they were putting up some stuff saying that these changes aren't going to actually take effect in terms of like your program until the following program year, not this August or for this program year that we're about to start, even though the rule change goes into effect in October. So we just wanted to know if there was any more clarity provided to you all in regards to whether or not we need to not enroll. Like I've got lots of full-time members who just completed their second or third terms that wanted to renew. And so if it's a risk, I don't want to renew them because I don't want to have to pay that back. But if it's official that the rule's not going to take effect in that way until program year, 25, 26, then, that'll change things a little bit. So I just wanted to kind of get your all's input on that.
So that is a very reasonable question. The probably unfortunate and unsatisfactory answer that I'm going to give is that we don't have guidance from the AmeriCorps agency yet on exactly how the rollout of that the new regulations is going to impact the the program year that's about to start. Ideally they would provide that before the program year starts, because you all have people that you would like to enroll, and it is kind of important for you to know what is and is not allowed. So I don't know how they're going to apply the new rules and regulations to the year that's about to start, because the rule itself doesn't go into effect until October. So what would be really bad, like you suggested, is that you start a member who's already, served the terms that would be limited under the new rule, because under the current situation, you could enroll a full-time member who's already earned 2 educational awards. But so you enroll the member, you get to October 1, and then they say, no, this member is no longer eligible. Then you have to exit the member and pay back all of the member support costs that you've spent on that member. I don't know if that is how things are going to play out. I just don't know. My advice to you would be to be conservative in your approach to that, and just take into account your agency's ability to pay back, potentially several $1,000s, depending on how many members we're talking about, of living allowance and FICA and accidental death and dismemberment, all of the member support costs, if the member is then determined to be not eligible for an additional term come October 1.
Okay.
Yeah. So my recommendation.
Would that just suggest? Yeah, I mean, you may be getting to this, but would that just suggest to probably forego any like risky member placements? Essentially, not to do that, even if the rule may not go into effect, unless we hear that officially. It's probably better to err on the cautious side.
That would be my recommendation, because without that official guidance, I don't know, and I would really hate for any of you to incur those costs and then those costs not be allowable. I mean, in my opinion, it would certainly be much easier to wait until we know, and then bring someone on if they can serve in another term, than to bring them on and find out later that they're not eligible. So my advice would be to wait on anybody who's questionable until we get guidance. And then once we have guidance, then you can make the decision. When we get the guidance, it should be clear on whether or not you can or cannot enroll them in an additional term.
Yeah, but that's a tough one, right?
Yeah.
Like the way Connor's talking, it sounds like he has a bunch of folks that would make up his core that he has to choose whether to have recruitment like achieved or undercut his recruitment, but then potentially incur a risk. I mean, for us, even with the few people, all of our AmeriCorps money goes to living allowance, and we put more on top of it. So it's like more than $25,000 a member that applies to. And then it gets into like the fractions of members, and there's no functional way to calculate that at this time. Gosh, that's a tough one. And this is one of those where it's like, Volunteer Tennessee, I know that you will give us information when AmeriCorps does, because even the regional office has no clue about this. So this is like up above. It seems like Ask is talking to people who seem to have a sense of this. But deeply frustrating that we have to go to a third-party advocacy organization to provide us some degree of guidance. I have members who've relocated from all across the country, right? They have leases,
Mm-hmm.
They have things. Some of them may have done partial terms, which may mean we owe some amount of money. if they hold programs to it, for all the sunny rhetoric that they put out about increasing accessibility to service, I'm a very optimistic person, but it feels like bullshit.
Yeah.
How it feels.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah. And we are right with you in the frustration of not having any guidance yet, because I mean, they know. I mean, some states have already started their AmeriCorps programs because they're able to move more quickly with their contracting process, and they had programs that started July 1. So um, uh, so there are already programs across the country that are already at the point where they've had to make this decision without any guidance. So yeah. It, so, and I see Ashley ask if it's too late to change your start date to October 1. That's up to you in terms of a program decision. If you're able to swing that with all of your members and your agency and your partners, and it makes sense for you, you could certainly look at doing that. But obviously there's a lot of moving pieces that you would have to work out individually within your program to make that work. So anyway, I mean, the bottom line is we're super frustrated about it. I don't, to be honest, I just don't understand why they have not given the guidance yet, because they know that programs are starting, programs have started, programs are going to be starting really soon. And it's not like they just announced this yesterday and they're now trying to scramble to get the guidance. They announced this quite some time ago. They knew that the new rules and regulations were going to go into effect even before they announced them, because they did them. So they knew what the new rules were going to be. They're their rules. So in my opinion, they should have had that guidance prepared beforehand to be able to roll out at the same time they rolled out the announcement about the new rule. But they did not do that. Yeah, Angie's got your hand raised.
Yeah, I apologize because I'm not up on all of this. I haven't been following it. Could you, in the event that maybe you can't find that email with the information that I could share with David, could you just give me a brief 2 or 3 sentences about the potential impact of this?
Well, yeah. So I can't find the email on the AmeriCorps page, although, yeah, I mean, they usually are pretty good about posting stuff on their website, but I can't find it.
But it sounds like if I'm following this correctly, and my knowledge about all of this is not as vast because we have 2 people working on AmeriCorps, and I really don't get into this area. But it sounds like there is a potential impact for this year regarding the amount of the living stipend. Is that correct?
No. So
Okay.
yeah, so the email that I just forwarded to you, Angie, is not until the 25-26 program year.
Okay.
Which is the federal fiscal year 25 funding. So it's, yeah.
Nothing changes for this year, but we would need to be more well-versed about this in terms of when we renew or continue. Okay, got it.
Right. Well, yeah. So that's the issue around the funding. Now, so that's the discussion about the AmeriCorps living allowance, but the discussion that we were just talking about, that Connor brought up and then Jason added in, is that related to the change in how members who have already earned 2 education awards, whether or not they can continue to serve additional terms. That that rule goes into effect October 1 and will potentially impact the program year that's about to start.
And is that a completely different scenario than the other two issues that we've been discussing?
Yes, unfortunately,
Okay.
it is yet another complicating factor for, and it could potentially impact the year that's about to start, because that rule goes into effect October 1, but we have not yet gotten guidance from AmeriCorps on how that would impact the current program year.
I got it. But okay.
Hey,
Jason,
Angie.
it sounds yes.
Yeah, I just sent the link to the Federal Register. In
Okay.
section D, it'll tell you a little bit about what we're talking about currently to give you. It's like the full text that kind of explains these rule changes.
Okay.
This is all the final rule, that link I just sent, and I think Latifa sent something too. So yeah, there's a few resources there in the chat.
Okay, great. Thank y'all so much. And I apologize for my lack of knowledge about all of this. Thank you.
No, it's okay. I mean, because I'm sure you're not the only one who hasn't been following this closely.
Yeah. There's a lot.
Yeah, no, it is a lot to keep track of, and the particular thing that we're discussing right now is again is specifically related to full-time members who have already earned 2 full-time education awards, because under the old rule, they could serve another 2 terms, but just not be, they wouldn't earn the education award, but you could still use federal resources to support those terms.
Okay.
The new rule essentially says that once you've earned your equivalent of 2 full-time education awards, you can no longer use federal funds to support an additional term.
Okay.
So that's the issue that we're talking about right now. And again, it really only applies to members who have already earned the equivalent of 2 full-time education awards and want to serve another term.
Okay. I have a feeling that might not apply to us because of our 1-year residency program, but
Yeah.
I will
Yeah.
be watching that.
Yeah. Well, now it could, if they're an alumni from another program, either in Tennessee or another state, and they've already earned 2 education awards, that could impact. But again, that would be kind of a special circumstance. So I think
that's helpful.
Yeah. So Ashley, you had your hand up first, and then Rachel.
Okay. So question, what about the individuals who may be starting this year and they were going to get a partial of their award because they were almost to that second year, the 2 full year, but not, they don't even, so that falls into that convoluted situation.
Well,
like they've done 1 year and then they did 3/4 and now they're going to do a half. And so they're only going to get a half of their award.
Well,
for their wages through half their year.
Well, so my understanding is that e-grants wouldn't allow you to enroll a member to earn more than the equivalent of 2 full-time education awards, even before the rule change, to put them into the portal to be eligible for that award, is my understanding. Now, I could be wrong about that. So if they've already served a couple terms and still had some leftover education award that they could still earn, they should still be able to do that as long as it doesn't exceed the equivalent of 2 full-time education awards. And again, my understanding is that e-grants wouldn't allow you to enroll that person to begin with.
I haven't. It's just that I have a person coming up and I think she only has a portion left, but she's going to go in for a halftime slot, but really she only getting a quarter of award. left. So does that mean she's going to have to go in as a quarter-time member instead of a half-time member in order for her to get anything? Because I was under the impression they'll just give you out what was the difference, what the difference was. Does that make sense?
No, your question does make sense. I don't know the answer to it. Again, my understanding is that the portal wouldn't allow you to enroll that person into a halftime slot if all they had available was a quarter-time educational award left on that 2 full-time equivalent. But I could be wrong about that. But I would say that if all they have left is a quarter-time education award, then I would recommend that's what you enroll them in is a quarter-time member. Now you can ask, and you can even require that members serve more than the minimum, because the minimum is the minimum. The program sets their minimum, again, within reason. I mean, you can't ask a half-time member to serve 1,700 hours, but you could certainly within reason ask a half-time member to serve 1,000 hours or 950 hours, depending on your program design.
Okay.
Sure. Okay, Rachel. Jason, you have something specifically about that?
Oh, yeah. I was just going to say, but like at this point, if people are recruited, the program design is already set, and like under enrolling them and giving them less benefit. I'm sorry.
Well, there's also no minimum living allowance for anything other than a full-time member. So, I mean, within the constraints of your budget, you could potentially pay a quarter-time member. There is a maximum. So as long as you're not paying beyond that maximum, you could potentially pay a quarter-time member more living allowance than what a typical quarter-time member would get. Rachel, you have a question? Oh, you're muted.
You're muted, Rachel.
Sorry, took down my hand, but not unmuted. So I know we don't have full time anymore. So this is a different, but also related question to this. Should we also air? So we have people who we would have had back for a 5th term or 6th term, etc. And it'll be a while before they exceed their 2 education awards regardless. But we are are planning to invite back and trying to think about ways that they could come on after October 1st under the 24-25 year. Should we also err on the side of caution because we don't have enough guidance to know for sure? As of October 1st, e-grants or the new system that we have will allow us to enroll them again because, before it would give us the little clock. This is their last term, kind of essentially telling us that. So should we also you might not want to plan for them to be able to start right away because we've got to have more guidance for the 5th term, 6th term members?
Yeah, so just to clarify, you're asking about members who, under the current guidance, would be exceeding the maximum 4-term limit. And that is a very good question. And I don't have a good or satisfactory answer for you, but my recommendation would be to wait until we get guidance before enrolling those, because I don't know if they've even adjusted the portal to remove that 4-term limit. So it may be the case that the portal might not even let you do it yet.
Yeah.
Even though conceptually it could be that AmeriCorps is going to say, well, the rule takes place October 1. We know we're a month or 2 before that, but go ahead and enroll members for a 5th or 6th term, even though the rule hasn't gone into effect yet. I doubt they're going to do something like that. My guess is that they are probably going to come back and say that guidance takes effect on October 1, and up until October 1, the previous guidance applies, and therefore you can't enroll someone in the 5th or 6th term beyond the current maximum limit. And so you would have to wait until after October 1st.
We would wait until after October 1st. That's what we're planning. It was just a matter of if we would be able to, kind of on the opposite, but still similar question, not related to the education award amounts or charging it to the grant, but just whether or not that goes into effect immediately under the current grant year as of October 1st.
Yeah, my understanding is that the removal of the term limit will go into effect immediately beginning October 1. And so you could immediately then enroll someone in, again, as long as they haven't earned the equivalent of the 2 full-time education awards, you could enroll someone in their 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th.
Hopefully October 1st.
October 1st. Yeah, that's my understanding. But again, with the caveat that we don't have the guidance, but that rule does take effect October 1. And so unless they come back with something to say, they've already said it takes effect October 1, and that is part of the rule. So the question in my mind would be really what happens before that, not what happens after it. But I think it's wise to be cautious on all of this until we get some guidance. So I think it's wise to wait until October 1 to enroll anyone beyond that 4-term limit, and also anyone who's already earned 2 full-time education awards. I wouldn't enroll them until we get guidance.
Just, soapbox, there's no additional answers to be milked out of this, but just like, because there's programs that started this month across the country that have people that could potentially be liabilities for their respective programs. I mean, it seems like if AmeriCorps held people to the current program year, I mean, the amount of negativity and ill will that would create among grantees, programs. I mean, if it costs some programs, if they ended up being accountable for those costs, they would fold. I mean, it just seems like a really bad look.
Yeah, I agree. And really, I know we're really past time, and I think Candace is probably going to bring out the hook pretty soon. But Ashley, you are correct under the current version of the rule that it's 4 term limits and then 2 full-time education awards, but that changes October 1. The limit on terms goes away, but the limit on the education award stays in effect. So you can't earn more than the equivalent of 2 full-time education awards, period. But there's no longer a 4-term limit.
I think we'll end it with Ashley's last question in the chat. I think she's under hoping for the best and preparing for the worst. But what advice do you have, Jim, for going forward?
Yeah, well, I would say step back away from the trash fire and try to be calm. So I would recommend being cautious and conservative in all of this stuff until we can get that guidance. So just do the best you can with that understanding. Enroll the members that you are sure aren't going to have any problems, and then wait for any questionable members until either we get guidance or until October 1, when we know for sure that the rule has gone into place.
Connor, you good? You got something? We're all good? Oh, good. Okay, perfect. All right. Not lobby on Saturdays. Ashley, and with that, we're going to take a quick breather, take a quick break. So let's take a minute. Let's come back at 2:25, take about an 8-minute break, grab some water, stretch a little bit. If you have any questions that are still lingering before now and the end, you can throw them in the chat and we'll get them over to Jim and we can follow up with everybody by email. But and so with that being said, let's go ahead and take a break. We will resume at 2:25. Thank you, Jim, for all of your guidance and your help and your explanations to as much as you can. We appreciate you as always. And we'll take a quick break. We'll see you guys in a minute.